no one had numbers because the National Park Service, which controls the National Mall, does not put any out. This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer berating reporters for the coverage of the crowds at Trump's inauguration, arguing simultaneously that there are no official numbers, while also falsely asserting it was the largest crowd in history. Lots to unpack here with me this morning. Let's talk about it all with David Axelrod, CNN senior political commentator, Congresswoman Mia Love, Republican of Utah, Tennessee Congressman Marsha Blackburn, Republican of Tennessee, as I said, and former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, a Democrat. Let's start with this debate about crowd sizes. It seems obvious that President Obama had bigger crowds, but so what?
I have to tell you, I was sitting at the podium there, and I could see a ton of people.
Yeah.
Lots of people. It was a great day. Let's just move on. I mean, it was just there were a lot of people that showed up, and I was happy to see it.
There were lots of people that showed up, David. What's going on here? Why would Sean Spicer, in his first press conference at that podium, be talking about crowd size?
The question you're really asking is who cares, and the answer is one person cares, and that person happens to be President of the United States, and he works for the President of the United States. The real question is who can tell the President, do not do this. This is not worth our time. When you, who can tell him when you go to the CIA, don't get into politics when you're standing in front of the wall of honor. You know, when you speak to a armed services ball, don't get into politics. Thank and honor those people who are young people who are serving our country. Someone needs to be able to do that, or he's going to be diverted from the points he wants to make.
It seems to me, Congressman Blackburn, that President Trump, whatever the size of the crowd, however big the ratings for the inaugural, he's the president, and a lot of people are rooting for him, and going down these bunny holes doesn't serve his own interest.
He has an opportunity to bring people to him at this point in time. And let's do the tote board on the number of regulations we can get on the books, the number of executive orders we can rescind, the number of, the amount that we can reduce taxes.
Yeah, the number of jobs you can bring back to this country.
Yes, jobs that we can create. And I'm going to leave counting numbers on that. Next 4 years from now, I just want us to expand broadband enough in this country that we have more people than ever streaming the inaugural.
When this happens, though, can I say, do you ever, I know you want him, well, first of all, we all as Americans want him to succeed.
Sure,
Yes.
Absolutely.
But do you, as a supporter of his, ever just like put your hands in your head and just say, no, don't do that. Don't say things that are not true. Don't focus on, you're standing in front of the wall of heroes at the CIA. Don't talk about your crowds. Don't berate a pool reporter who messed up.
I'm cheering for the president and vice president to pull people to them and continue this movement of getting Washington, D.C. Reformed and pushing power and money out of this city and back to the states and local governments.
So head never in hand. Head never in hand. You never.
I am cheering. I am cheering.
Okay.
I am so for President Trump, and he is good on building relationships. He is going to build great relationships with Capitol Hill, and he has built a great relationship with the American people, and we are going to expand that.
Well, that's the question. The relationship he's building with the American people, because as Congressman Blackburn points out, there is an opportunity here. And you were at the Women's March yesterday, Nina Turner.
Yeah.
I don't know that he has taken advantage of that opportunity to unite people.
Well, not yet. One would hope. I mean, good God, the numbers don't really matter because he took the oath of office.
Right. Well, that's
so
the point.
He is the president, so he has to get over that. But yesterday I did talk to women and men from all walks of life, and a lot of them were not necessarily there to protest the president himself as much as some of the policies and the things that they are concerned about. But he has to do more bridge building and less talk about building a wall. There are walls up right now in this country, and it's not between him and folks who are trying to get into this country. It is really between him and some of the people who live in this country.
Let's talk about his inaugural address. He presented a very starkly populist vision of how he sees the country and what he wants to happen. Let's take a look.
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
So he really took aim, Congressman Blackburn, at globalization and elites in both parties. I think it's for Democrats and Republicans. It wasn't a particularly Republican speech. It wasn't a particularly conservative speech. Critics would say, the ship has sailed on globalization. This is the world we're in. How do you do America first in the 21st century?
I think you do it by thinking in terms of the short term and the long term. As you look at policies, how is this going to affect us now? How will it affect us 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road? And that is the view that Donald Trump will bring to this administration. Let's just not do something thinking of the next election. Let's think long term, and what kind of legacy is this going to lead? What kind of path is it going to create? Goodness, in trade, we need to think about this. As we look at manufacturing, bringing jobs back, we have to be thinking in terms of the effects of these policies and what it's going to yield. Tax policy and the changes that are going to be there, how is it going to affect families now and then affect their ability to build a nest egg for retirement?
David, President Obama came to office with a lot of ties to labor unions. He ended up being one of these members of the global elite pushing forward trade deals, although one could argue there were many more worker protections in the Pacific trade deal than in NAFTA, for example. Is it going to be tough for President Trump to fight this tide of globalization?
Look, I don't think that, as you say, I think that ship has sort of sailed. The question is that really the battle of today and tomorrow? The congressman talks about the future. There's a greater threat to middle-class jobs and wages from robots and computers than there is from China and Mexico today. What is the plan for dealing with that? Where are the people who, for example, are going to lose their jobs when driverless cars come online this decade? Millions and millions of people. Where are they going in the economy? Where are they going to find productive work? What does that impact on wages and on family security? These are fundamental questions that people want the president to deal with.
And in fact, I think the new Labor Secretary nominee, Puzder, is a big proponent of automation in the restaurants that he owns.